Hello.
Hello,
Hello.
everybody. Aloha.
Hey. Hmm. Oh, Joy, the baby's coming to Sunday sittings too. This is great. So take your time to see everybody, the other pages. We all made it through another week. Whoa, getting intense. Hmm. Good to see you.
We can begin by taking a few deeper breaths, full body breaths. Feel it filling up the area around the solar plexus and rib cage and beyond. See if you can feel the energy from in breaths and out breaths, right down to the fingers and toes. Feeling the body from within the body, rather than through a picture of the body, an image or thought forms of the body. The direct elemental felt sense, sensations, and perception. And see if you can call up a deeply relaxed form of awareness that's not located any particular place. It's just in free flow with how the body is felt in this moment and successive moments. We can further form the development of our meditation if we have the intention of certain mental dispositions that accompany mindfulness, like the four Brahma Viharas, and perhaps as I quickly describe them, you'll recognize which one is for you today. The soft tenderness and warmth of metta develops an immediate sense of goodwill and friendliness toward our body from within the body and the senses, which are also the body, and the mind, that is that aspect that knows the body as body. Metta as a lens through which we feel these in-breaths, out-breaths, the solar plexus, the energy that goes beyond the rib cage down to the fingers and toes. Through the lens of this warmth, connected tenderness, and deep ease of being. Just abide in this profound, unconditional, loving kindness, aware of it and other physical, mental phenomena as they appear and stream along moment to moment. Karuna, unconditional, caring, fearless compassion, may also speak to you as the response of the heart of goodwill when it comes up against any kind of stress, pain, physical, mental suffering. The sweetness of caring. The karuna lens of mindfulness practice cares for whatever is felt, experienced, or sensed. And should there be in your experience some areas of fulfillment, beauty, happiness, see if that deep, unfettered, childlike joy in the heart is available as a lens through which we experience the body within the body, mental states and emotions. And finally, the great equalizer and navigating principle of our practice in our lives, the upekkha, or equanimity. That can stand in the midst of things as they are, the turbulent systems, the doldrums, the very attractive, the very repulsive, the mind neither pulled toward or pushed away from anything. The mind that streams along in mental equipoise, balance. It's aware of things as they are, unfolding as they do, from causes and conditions. See if any or all of these Brahmaviharas can settle as companions of the mindfulness, the quality of profound presence, feeling things from within themselves, not as a separate observer. This inner stream of observing along with the stream of things.
Mm. Thank you, Stephen. Just before Michelle starts, I just wanted to make a quick announcement. It's something we used to actually type in every Sunday sitting, and we've sort of stopped doing it. But just a reminder that we really ask folks, especially when we're giving a talk, to not write into the chat unless it's like a technical issue, like you can't hear or something's not working. It just helps keep the container kind of focused and concentrated for people, and for us when we're writing a talk, and we put a lot of energy into these. It can be distracting if someone's trying to like engage us kind of on the side. So just thanks for holding that space. And of course, there's time for Q&A and questions and engagement afterwards. And so we look forward to that.
Thank you. Thanks. Thanks, Stephen. Thanks, Jesse. I just wanted to begin by kind of acknowledging that the way that all of us offer the teachings is kind of, it's meant to be infused with a gentleness and a kindness that we feel, whether we're connecting that kindness and gentleness with our body or our smell, the nose door, the tongue door, the taste, the sound door, the ear, the eye door, the eye, the the mind door, the chitta, the heart mind door. Of these 6 sense doors, I think you've heard over years and years that we really believe that bringing this, especially as Steve did today, the loving kindness, the compassion, the empathetic joy, the equanimity into the liberation wisdom teachings, develop a wise discernment, because the heart is soft enough to be with things as they are. So there's a great intent there. There's a great motivation that our sense of the inflexible, hard mind can't relax and can't deepen the wisdom to be with things as they are. So that this is it's meant to be restorative and healing, but also deeply liberating. And you could say that it's like we don't talk about it, but there is a kind of shift from a more patriarchal, warlike approach to a more, inclusive of a feminine approach. And so within that, you can also, I hope, have heard over the years that we tend to not encourage people to sidestep their emotions or override their emotions, but really to, if they come up, if they're predominant, and we have enough Brahmavihara or mindfulness that we really connect with these emotions and relate to the emotions, whether they're pleasant, unpleasant, neutral, just like we would the sound of a bird or a physical sensation, the breath. So this kind of way in which there's an emphasis on including our bodies, including the emotion, is very much an ethic. Knowing that anything that appears, if we pay attention to it with wise discernment, it is liberating. So I think that the last few years of our Zoom retreats, that I think about even the word pandemic, which comes from the Greek pandemos, it actually means pertaining to all of the people. Pandemic, means pertaining to all of the people. And I think that if you care a lot about what's going on in the world, the last years I think have felt rough, very rough. And I think, even if the last Supreme Court decision was about the guns was not enough, a few just right after came this decision about abortion. So again, if you care about civil rights issues, and I think that most of us will feel this kind of increasing attack. And I would say just this last hammering that we just got, I think something feels very different to me about it, and it could just be accumulative. But I think also that it affects deeply half the population, never mind all of us. So I'm offering this just from that perspective that if you have been cycling through a lot of difficult emotions, whether you're from America or not, I think that the range of kind of how scary it can feel. I don't even mean this particular decision, but how scary the times, this increasing kind of dukkha, the grief of it, or the anger or rage. I think that this recent decision is really about something very personal that really the Supreme Court has no business deciding, actually. So I think it does bring up even more kind of a roller coaster of emotion. So I wanted to kind of give the context of how we offer these teachings, because I think I feel like it's so important to, with whatever, not just this issue, but whatever is can get triggered for us, but including this, that it's okay to feel the difficult emotions, that there's nothing wrong with that it's really important to honor them and not to sidestep them. I actually had to give myself I feel like it was a kind of luxury of taking this last decision quite personally. I actually made a decision to take it personally. And I thought that was interesting to explore. I wanted to explore it. So when I was about 5 years old, I wanted to go to some kind of spiritual school or institution. A friend of mine next door was going to Hebrew school, and another friend that was going to a place where she was learning kind of Catholic prayers. And I asked my parents if I could go somewhere, and they said, as long as we don't have to drive you, you can pick a place yourself. So I walked around at 5 and I found the closest place. I didn't care what it was. And it turned out to be a Catholic church. I knocked on the rectory door, and got myself baptized. And then by the time I was 13 years old, I was officially excommunicated by that awful cardinal who there's been a movie made about in Boston. I got, there was a ceremony, I was officially kicked out. It was very traumatic. And the reason I was kicked out is because I kept wanting to discuss euthanasia and abortion. So this was 1964. And every every night, every Monday night at CCD class, I was brought to the priest because I would raise my hand and say, I want to talk about abortion or euthanasia. And when I first started teaching in the Buddhist world, it wasn't safe to talk about abortion. It wasn't even safe. So I feel that sense of like how much the world changed in a good way, and even that we can discuss it, right? That it's a discussable subject, and how nuanced it actually needs to be, how nuanced and how much care needs to go into these discussions. And ironically, the reason I wanted to talk about euthanasia and abortion was also very personal. And my mom had had a very hard life before I was born, and very intense domestic violence in her marriage. So she had one child and then lost two children, had no support for dealing with that, and then she went to the priest because her doctor told her she would die if she got pregnant and had another baby. So this is just one story of many, many stories, but she was told she would die. She went to the priest and asked if she could practice birth control, and he said no. And she was from a very poor background, the only thing she had was that belief system left. And he said no, and she felt very conflicted, had the next baby, who almost died, very hard time, and then was told again if she had another baby, she died. That's me. And I was born dead. She was pronounced dead. And from that point on, my mother gave up. She was completely broken. That's one person. So I feel like when you think of all of us, male, female, you think about all of our grandmothers and great-grandmothers and great aunts and children, grandchildren, great nieces, but everybody, it's like, what a mess, right? How much compassion we need. And my mother just drank herself to death, and then was kept alive way beyond she should have by the doctors. So when I was 13, the reason I was wanting to talk about euthanasia was because it felt like it wasn't fair to her to keep her alive like that. they were injecting her in her bones. My father couldn't say no. So, when my sister had a baby at 15, very hard, very many things, no support. So I'm not telling you this for any kind of even empathy. It's more empathy for the situation we're all in, because I bet everybody here has a story. It takes so much compassion and equanimity, and the importance of letting the emotions go through, right? And to learn from them, to transform them more into wisdom and loving kindness. This is from Ajahn Chah. Peace is to be found in the same place within oneself as agitation and suffering. Peace is to be found in the same place within oneself as agitation and suffering. When you experience suffering, you can also find freedom from suffering. And in my early practice, I really felt like it took me time to understand that freedom from suffering wasn't freedom from pain. So important. So facing the pain, and I think there's many different ways we all face pain. My older sister, the one who had a baby at 15, and there was so much shame. But in her early years, she wasn't very political. And now as an elder woman, I think she'll be 76 this year. I called her today because she just had surgery on her eye yesterday. And I asked her how she was doing with the latest news. And she's so clear in how she feels. She said, it's really, really scary. And then she said, and I'm saying this because of around the sense that we don't sidestep. She said, I have to accept the fact that I'm going to be angry, very, very angry for the rest of my life. And I thought, that's awesome. I really have to say, wow, that's acceptance, right? This is how she feels, that's like, not resisting. Maybe she doesn't have a sense that it can be transformed into whatever, but I was like, wow, and then, but then she shifted into a kind of equanimity. She said, well, what will be, and it's going to be terrible. You can see why I love her, right? Like, she's so cool, right? It's what will be, but it's going to be terrible. And then she thought again, and she said, well, we all got to pick our battles. And she said, what I recommend is that every morning for all of us, we decide every morning what we're going to be upset about, but just pick one thing. Just pick one thing. There's so much to be upset about. Just pick one thing. And it was like so great, right? Just that sense of like accepting how it is. And then I'm offering kind of the woman who lived across the street from me, had 3 kids, housewife, and she worked so hard at marches, bus rides to Washington, about anything that was unjust in the 60s, but she focused on, she started the first Planned Parenthood in my area of Boston. And she was so angry all the time when I was young. It was amazing about everything. And kind of they've switched roles. It's like my older sister is sort of in that place, and now Linda, she's like, she wrote me. I asked her how she was doing, and she said, yes, we're part of change. And yes, we learn. We've been unborn and born. We've come so far. But in this exponential speeding up, time almost has no meaning. It appears when we think of this brief period we are living, nothing can save what was. The future is outracing us, and we, all beings, are maybe sensing this. We know what is known always. I like to think of kalpas, eons, as a perspective. Once learned with my beginner's mind. May all good be with us. Such a perspective, yeah. I hope you're roller coastering between the two, or at least not even roller coastering, but just allowing that range, right? Allowing how that kind of perspective my sister's offering or what my neighbor is offering. It's like that sense of finding the relative truth and the absolute truth. And really, I feel like in these times, I really feel it's the best time to practice. This is not a bad time to be alive. It's like, the Buddha taught dukkha. He taught that as a truth of existence. And if we keep stepping up to the plate and facing it and facing it and facing it, it's like the Dalai Lama said, our greatest teacher is hardship. Our greatest teacher is our enemies. And so there are so many ways that we have offered many times to not sidestep when an emotion comes up that we don't really want to be with. Partly what's hard about these times is we don't really want to be with what comes up, right? In relationship to it. And to feel like we have to keep standing up to things and keep standing up to things that are unjust. But noticing the corresponding physical sensations in our bodies and really, really exploring them with interest, like with fear or anger or grief or whatever comes up. It's like to really be able to be not in the past with an emotion or not think we know how to be with it, but really just have that sense of, oh, what is fear right now, free from my idea about it, and to really explore, where is there contraction of the heart, where is there heat, where is there numbness, where is there tightness in the body, that the four great elements, earth, air, fire, water, coming and going, and to really notice emotions as the mind. It's the mind state of it, the mind heart, to notice the thoughts passing through, coming and going by themselves. And also sometimes it's just the felt sense. Sometimes there are no words. There's just the felt sense in the body as a whole. Or sometimes we step back and are aware of knowing it, just knowing it. Very still, coming to stillness through our awareness of anger, or coming to a deeper stillness through our awareness of grief. It's just like coming to stillness through our awareness of the breath, with the sound of a bird, often the objects of the anger or the objects of the grief or the objects of the fear catch us. It's like we get caught in the thoughts about what the object of the fear, right? Or the object of the grief or the anger. And the part of our work as practitioners, when we're practicing, is to pull back that projection and pull back that projection and pull back that projection, because it prevents us from connecting to the emotion. It's a disconnect. And then we feel more alienated, more helpless in the face of what's happening. So Steve mentioned bringing the compassion in today with what's difficult or sticky. It's like compassion in these times, right? It's like the Buddha taught that compassion, karuna, that the proximate cause for the appearance of karuna or compassion is the helplessness or overwhelm we feel in the face of suffering. And I would say, in these last years, it's just like the predominant feeling tends to be at first, with every new blow, it's like the helplessness in the face of it, right? The overwhelm in the face of it. But if you see that that's the ticket to compassion, it's always that reminder that when you're feeling like, oh no, it's hopeless, helpless, it's like actually that's when the little light needs to go on. And usually it means at first that we need compassion. We need to be able to have our hand that is, say it's compassionate awareness, touch our heart and just to go, oh, right now I'm in pain. I'm upset, right? Like it's like be able to care about that, to care about it and not disconnect in the hopelessness or despair. The hopelessness and despair, fine, that if that's the emotion, you shift to that, right? But I'm trying to explain about the compassion that one doesn't need to drown in it as much as use it to transform it to more compassion and more care and more care and more care and more care. And this sometimes this takes time. I mean, this hopefully has been your practice this week, right? The last few days. And in that sequence of Brahma Vihara, of course, joy, the empathetic joy, the mudita, again, it's just like, I suppose with each day, my appreciation of the Buddha's teaching on all of it, but certainly the Brahma Vihara, that having to find that balance between this vast range of joy and sorrow on this planet, that to be able to balance, that the way that we disconnect from this range of joy and sorrow, that when we're up against a lot of dukkha, inwardly and outwardly, finding some joy, finding some beauty is essential. It's enough, or we can't find our goodness. We can't find goodness. If we lose it, it's just like, again, that trail into the black hole we all know so well. I take a lot of pictures of very simple things. There's a areca palm in my yard that in the desert, a lot of these plants that you would imagine in Hawaii are huge and bountiful. They look like bonsai, they sometimes look like little bonsai plants. And there's a plant, an areca palm, that's quite prolific in Hawaii, which usually grow big and they make hedges with them. It just doesn't grow very big. and it had flowers. It has some flowers, and I've never seen them because they're usually way up high, but it's like eye level for me because it's so short. So I love taking pictures of these things because these flowers are so little. You would need a little, magnifying glass to even see the little white flowers. But then if I take a picture now, the beauty of the modern camera, I can expand it and really see them without a lot of effort. And it brings me so much joy. Some plant that I've been around since 1983 when I moved to Hawaii, but never saw the flower. I got a message from somebody an old student that I never see anymore on Vancouver Island. And she's kind of been cooped up all winter, some health problems, and her daughter took her to I don't remember even the name of it, but it sounded like a beautiful park. And they were watching the tide recede and then come back in. They were there for the day, and they saw a walrus. And the walrus, they were so excited. They didn't see one before. And the walrus came right up and made eye contact with them. And I know that I had so much mudita for her, like just glorious, just boundless joy for her. She needed it. She's had a really hard winter, hard couple of years. This has been a song that I've had in my life for most of my years. I found it yet when I was young. It's from a Navajo origin myth, Song of the Earth Spirit. It is lovely indeed. It is lovely indeed. I am the spirit within the earth. The feet of the earth are my feet. The legs of the earth are my legs. The strength of the earth is my strength. The thoughts of the earth are my thoughts. The voice of the earth is my voice. The feather of the earth is my feather. All that belongs to the earth belongs to me. All that surrounds the earth surrounds me. I am the sacred works of the earth. It is lovely indeed. It is lovely indeed. And of course, the fourth Brahma Vihara, Upekkha. We go from this incredible strength we can find from connecting to the earth in this way. And it's like connecting with our goodness as part of this understanding of how to connect with the earth. That living in that way, the more we cultivate it, it's like we are an ongoing force for goodness, for good, an ongoing force for good, because we aren't stuck in that personal, alienated place, but we really are part of the world as we are. It's the truth. And so the upekkha, the unconditional acceptance of things as they are, the truth, the fourth Brahma Vihara, there is that understanding of that there is this vast range of joy and sorrow in the world, and that that's the truth. So it's out of the acceptance of that. And the word acceptance can be very tricky when there's so much difficulty. But I think that how we try to offer that is that it's not a matter of agreement or not that things happen that are difficult, right? It's like you can agree with what happens or not, but that doesn't change that it happened. Like life is moving along and we can accept how it's unfolding or not, but that is really being with things as they are. That last instruction of Steve, that just being with things as they are. Being with things as they are. But this is the most difficult understanding to translate, because it often, when people hear that, it means that one is condoning what is unjust or what is unacceptable, and that's not what this means. So it takes a lot of time and nuance to really get across, and a lot of one's own practice to understand the difference between denial or passivity or indifference, being numb, not connected to the pain in the world, not connected, just or being a doormat. That isn't this. This isn't this. It's not condoning. It's, in fact, our experience is that the more one can have the peace with what has happened, the unconditional acceptance of what is happening, then the action comes out of the purest motivation. So the action coming out of loving kindness or compassion or empathetic joy or unconditional acceptance, upekkha, or the wisdom, the acceptance of anicca, dukkha, anatta, all of this being aligned with the truth. When the motivation is aligned with the truth, and one transforms the difficult emotions in relationship to what is unjust, it doesn't say they're wrong or bad, that they're important. They're information. They tell us this isn't okay, right? So important. That the harnessing of the energy of it and finding the deeper practice with it, that is our spiritual path. And you actually become more effective usually if you actually do something with it at times, if one is wanting to be effective. So again, it's being able to come to that place where the emotions, the body isn't mine, the emotions aren't mine, the heart isn't mine. That shifting from being in the personal and shifting to understanding the impersonal. And then we can have this affectionate awareness that brings reality into focus. It's the affectionate awareness that brings reality into focus. So I'd like to end with something that I have mentioned a few times in these pandemic years. It's by Wang Anshi, a great poet from China. And he lived long ago. He had gotten the ear of the emperor, and he really was allowed to be the prime minister. So he put in, over many years, many reforms to he did reforms with the economy, with agriculture, with the military, with education, with taxation, with law and trade. This guy was a force to be reckoned with, because he believed that the people, if they are happy and prosperous, the country would flourish and be happy. He worked hard and did so much, but there were, of course, there's an elite system there of aristocracy and wealth, and they did not like it. They worked hard to oppose his reforms. And he actually was blamed and shamed and disgraced. His reforms were dismantled, but he spent the last 10 years of his life practicing. So he experienced that swing of the pendulum that we're all experiencing, like a swing of the pendulum. And he wrote this after the 10 years of practice, just before he died. But I see it as something that we all need to also find at times. Dawn lights up the room. I close my book and sleep, dreaming of Bell Mountain and full of tenderness. How do you grow old living with failure and disgrace? Stay close to the cascading creek, cold, shimmering. So do you have any questions? Nicole?
Hi, yeah. May I be heard or?
Pardon? Go ahead. I can't see you, but that's okay. We can hear you.
Okay, you can hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I didn't intend to ask a question, but I was just inspired by your talk. I'm just struggling lately to discern with this particular week and this event, but also in general, if what I'm feeling is really equanimity, because I feel closer to equanimity, I think, than to the others, but I also feel that it's numbness at times and it's very painful. So that was my question.
Do you want me to start, Steve? Yeah. Well, it sounds like you recognize what numbness feels like, right?
Yes, I think so. um, I think so, but it also feels like I'm getting to know equanimity in a new way, and maybe that feels not so good.
You know, that it's so interesting because I think particularly when there's times like this, if it's genuine equanimity, there isn't a angst. The angst has gone. There can be like a quiet acceptance of what's happening, like a peaceful feeling that can feel foreign when there is so much pain and when there's so many people in pain around us. But actually, the equanimity feels very peaceful. And I don't know. Sometimes I don't know if you can explore this, but I would ask you to look at that. Like, are you maybe another way to say it is, there's a way that the Buddha said developing a taste for liberation, like a taste for it, takes time, and that there might be a feeling where it might feel uncomfortable because it's so unfamiliar. I'm fishing. I'm not saying this is how it is. I'm fishing with you.
Well, that feels exactly what it is like. So thank you.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's really especially when there's so many people that might be expressing angst, that it's almost like if you're peaceful, you're not in touch. Like you're kind of you should be more emotional about it, right? Like one shouldn't be peaceful with it. Like that can be our culture. It's like the culture, healing the culture is what you're doing, but it's like it can be like either you're supposed to be very upset or you're supposed to be numb. And so to find this place of peace in it can be very, the Buddha called it going against the stream. So I think it takes practice to, like, I would guess that even though it's unfamiliar, if you're off by yourself, maybe in your room at night, laying down, explore that it might actually feel good.
Wow. Okay.
You could have compassion for feeling peaceful, but it being unfamiliar. Oh. I think this is such a good question. I don't, because I think it's I don't know, Steve, if you want to add anything to it, but it reminds me of what you're saying. It's like when that story about the Buddha, about when he was he had the different palaces for different seasons before he was a Buddha, when his father was a king, and he had a palace for the rains, a palace for the summer, a palace for this, and his father never wanted to have him see any suffering. Nicole, you know this story, right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. And then at one point, he kept going out. He kept escaping the palace, and a deva conjured up someone old, someone sick, and someone dead. And each time it was so shocking for him, he had the charioteer turn around and go back to the palace. And then he went out one more time, and he he saw a mendicant, which the translation, I love it. He saw someone more peaceful than peace itself. And that that was like the fourth heavenly messenger. That's what woke him up to like know what path he wanted to be on and become the Buddha. Like, it's so meaningful and beautiful. And I think I would really encourage you to take it that seriously, that someone more peaceful than peace itself. It's what we're all needing at this time more than anything, including ourselves. It's not personal, but that peace, it can be neutral, and that people object to that when they're so upset. They'd rather you be numb. Well, I guess I'm going to say one more thing about it. I think it's vulnerable too, Nicole. It's very vulnerable. I was going to have that as part of my talk, but I didn't have time. But that just being with what is, being with things as they are. You know, Steve, you could maybe say more about it, but it's like holding a baby bird in our hand. It's like you're holding life itself in your hand, that exquisite range of joy and sorrow and pleasure and pain, and just being with it as it is. It's incredibly vulnerable. And it could be, Nicole, that maybe it's just that it gets too overwhelming or hard to be with, and then you numb out. So that's fine. It's just like, fine. Just let that openness of heart happen. And then it could be that it just gets too much and you close. See if you can relate to that as like a rhythm of your heart. If you let it close, you'll feel safer. If you fight it, you won't feel safe. So let your heart mind do it itself. It'll do it itself if you're allowing it to be numb as well as vulnerable.
That helps a lot. It hasn't felt good in the past year or so to not be able to control that openness.
Yeah.
Or when it stops, I guess.
And I'll tell, Steve has a story. When he was a kid, he went to this Episcopal day school, and Father Linscott, he would have the kids all lay down on mats, and he'd have them all contract really tight and then like loosen up, something like that. So, Steve, maybe you can tell it, but I always think of it with this kind of thing where we can just practice it. You practice it's not like you can always feel your heart close, but you can feel your body tighten up and then relax, tighten up, relax. And we've been trained to think the tightening up is safe. And the vulnerability is safe when you have the mindfulness and the Brahma Viharas, Nicole. So it's like when you start to feel like it gets edgy, just like treat edgy as another interesting, important thing. It's getting edgy. And, you know, I don't know if you noticed yourself numb up, but that's one of the great feats of human beings, is that we can numb up. It's a big lucky us. If you can numb up, it's lucky, fortunate.
I see. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's good to see you or hear you. Good to hear you. Steve, do you have anything to add? Because it's such an important question.
I think you covered.
Okay.
Both covered
Yeah.
a lot. I just appreciated
Okay.
in Nicole's question the depth of her experience and the growth of your practice. I thought was really profound. I think it's just pretty covered. What Father Linscott was teaching us actually was how to relax. So starting with our toes, tensing the toes and the feet, the lower leg, relaxing the knees and the thighs and the hips and the stomach, relaxing like that. I didn't know it at the time that that was meditation in the 4th grade.
You're lucky to have Father Linscott.
Well, we're all lucky to have each other. Thanks, Nicole. That was a profound question and beautiful response, Michelle.
Karen.
Karen, you're muted. We can't hear you. Let's see. Can you unmute yourself there? There you go.
Yeah, I was saying that I may be asking almost the same question as Nicole did from a different place. I've been angry most of my life, and an activist in the '60s, and I and I understand for myself that being angry is not the answer. Is not that there's nothing wrong with it. This is me anyway, nothing wrong with it, but I don't, it kind of eats me alive, you know? And I've been trying to figure out, and it is where activism plays in Buddhism, because sometimes it feels like if you're just in your room or the cave or something, you know, and all this shit's happening out there, it doesn't, that's all you need. That's all. And you referenced, and when you were talking about, you'll come up with a true thing to do. And so it's difficult for me to know, well, that's not true. When I really feel guidance and I'm doing something that is true, I know it. But if I'm just angry, the discernment of the two is sometimes difficult, especially when we're so provoked, or I'm so provoked. So I'm just curious if you had anything to say about activism in sort of the Buddhist world, because so often, I mean, to me, Buddha was an activist. How he treated untouchables, how he was against war. There were just so many things that he did that were activist in stepping into more of a equal world, if or something. So I'm just curious what you would say about that, because I think sometimes I feel like Buddhists don't think you should do anything, and sometimes I want to do too much. So.
Well, I think we'd all say something different, but I don't know, Steve, if you want to start or you want me to start. I think this is about as personal a question as you can get, because I think there are many Buddhists that are activists, and I think there are many Buddhists who aren't. And I think there's examples, even when you look at places that you might not think that there were, like the monks and nuns that are in Cambodia or Burma or, Laos or Vietnam or the Southeast Asian Buddhism, there's a lot more activism in ways than you would think. They might not call it that, but there are the people that really find great joy in activism. So I would give an example of the teacher that the monk Sayadaw in Burma that we taught up with in Shazwa in northern Burma for so many years. He, for example, saw himself as a bodhisattva. And so one of the things that I noticed after many years of being with him and being up there was, and Steve could speak to this too, but as he started, building schools or helping with the hospitals or all the projects we've done up there in Burma, when it's like when I would see Sayadaw Lakana in the school or the hospital, he would be so happy. I think that's like a beautiful, like I'm giving this as an example because I can give you many, many examples, but I think what can be hard from my perspective of activism is when it leads to burnout. Because that's why I read that poem by Wang, because I feel like if you just look at I'm 70, right? The generation where a lot of us have worked really hard to bring about change, intentionally, really working hard to bring about change. And you can see a lot of great change, but we're getting blows. We're getting a lot of hard blows, and that when the motivation comes out of being attached to a result of the effort, it really leads to burnout. I mean, I could give you many examples of that. I think my favorite is my attempts to do TB and AIDS projects, like all of us were doing in Burma. But the early years of those projects were really a disaster, and I put so much energy into it, and it just like, now, it's more timely. It's kind of like talking about abortion in 1964 to the Catholic Church didn't go over big, right? But now it's actually a subject you can talk about. But it's like these kind of situations. What happens if you are practicing? What I think happens that if you are more of an activist, and I think there are people who really are pure activists, then hopefully the practice shifts the motivation so that it doesn't cause so much suffering, right? Of course, anger can be a motivating force, but when one isn't getting the result one wants, certainly. That's why I like my friend Linda's, what she wrote me today, because she works so hard. I know this stuff must be so hard on her, but she's saying she's taking the perspective of eons. She's taking the perspective of, she's 86. She can't go out there and get tear gassed anymore. She could, but it's just not what she's going to do as an elder. But I think that individually, we all have our roles and where we act. And I think that there is often a big difference between a pure activist and a non-pure activist. I think that's a different karma and a different choice. And there are many non-Buddhists doing it, and there are many Buddhists doing it. But I think they're different. It's different.
I was I was thinking that sometimes when I act, not in the streets anymore because I can't take it either, but uh, uh, that I get so nourished by it, not by the result, but by the energy that moves through me and the guidance that I get, that there's just a way of feeling actually very close to God or whatever spirit, however, I realize that's not really, but close to Buddha. I don't, whatever. But and other times I'm just drained and I'm still trying to figure out which of those, it seems hard for me to back off some of the things, some of the opportunities I've had to talk to young people and do things like that. But I can't do them all, you know. So that's partly why I asked you the question. I don't know whether you have anything to say about what I just said.
No, well, also, I mean, it's accepting that, to me, it's accepting that sometimes we get drained, that's okay, right? Like your energy just falls out, and that other times you'll have this incredible peak experience. It's the same if you do a retreat, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah,
the
I do
same,
know.
right? So it's okay, you know. I think just as you get older, it's facing your limits on how much you can do. It's partly, I think, what's hard in our times again for the elders is that you see so much of what you would want to do, but you can't. You actually can't. You have to face your limits.
And that's hard. It's really, I've had some opportunities to actually be an elder mentor in a class, and I turned it down. I did it last year, and I'm going to do it next term. But it's just I was burnt out. It was my limits, and I don't accept my limits.
I think your body will win. I'm finding my body's winning over my
Yeah.
willpower. Old age just kind of takes care of it. Don't worry, Karen.
Okay. Damn it. Thank you.
I want to make a response.
Yeah.
I noticed how Sayadaw U Pandita was a teacher for many activists in Burma, Western and Burmese, in the 80s and 90s. And when they would come to him, sometimes I'd be in the cottage, including Aung San Suu Kyi. He'd be like, he'd be a resource for their welfare. Like Michelle was talking today, how to respond from peaceful places in order to enact change and whatnot, and how to do things appropriately and with good intentions. And he was a mentor and teacher to activists in that way. And then one time, I saw his own brand of activism when he brought me to this funeral of the head of the order of our lineage. It's called Suijin. It means the golden order. And the Suijin Sayadaw at that time had passed away at 103 and was reputedly very highly awakened. And he had made it really clear in a will-like document how he wanted to, the process that he wanted when he passed away, like from which monks and nuns would be around and, carrying his body and the cremation process, and then the distribution of the ashes and whatnot. And it was all usurped by the military tyrant of the time and was made into a countrywide TV spectacle. And although they still allowed one of the monks to speak and do a chant, it was the top generals who did most of the speaking and most of the acting. And then they had the 10 top generals sitting opposite the 10 top Suijin Sayadaws. And opposite Sayadaw U Pandita was the chief of intelligence, this general. And the ceremony involved, offering to the monks their requisites, medicines, robes, toiletries, and things that a monk or nun needs to be a monk or a nun. And at the moment that the 10 generals were picking up the requisites to offer to the monks, which makes them a lot of merit, Sayadaw U Pandita just got up, turned around, walked towards Sayadaw U Lakana, the Chazwa Sayadaw, and myself, and said, "We're going." And we went outside, got in the car, and drove away. Never said a word about it. And I heard from attendants of Sayadaw, like down the road a little bit, once he made that statement, the junta government, the generals, encourage a senior Sayadaw, senior even to U Pandita, to call him in and maybe admonish him. So Sayadaw comes in with his big staff, and he stands opposite the chair where the senior Sayadaw is. And the senior Sayadaw said nothing for a really long time. And then U Pandita finally said, "You called me. I came. What do you want?" And my friend, the attendant to Sayadaw, U Pandita, said that the senior Sayadaw couldn't speak. He had nothing to say at all. So U Pandita just handled his staff, turned, walked out, never said a word. So I think of his style of activism. I think of Aung San Suu Kyi's, which was radical, and she spent 15 years in detention and is again in detention now. And the rest of the activists, some who had spent, government people who are working with Aung San Suu Kyi, who had been tortured and spent like 15 years in a cage at Insane Prison, which is the name of a prison in the former capital, Yangon. And to hear their stories and what they went through, what they're willing to do, lay down their lives, or through writing, to all various forms of activism, I just thought that there was space for all of it. It was all held, and it was, especially as Nicole was saying, that discernment between, what's peace and what's really kind of disconnect. And those examples on those different levels, the laying your life down or the silent but yet poignant, powerful activism of U Pandita, they all have their impact, and they all brought about degrees of change for a while. Because for a while, things were good in Burma.
Thank you.
thank you for your contribution to our welfare most of your life. And having such a profound insight on your anger and how to use it. What I
You're
would call
welcome.
fierce compassion.
Fierce compassion. Todd?
Okay, I just have a comment on Karen's comment. First, I appreciate your courage to be an activist, and my comment is I would probably use the Buddha's advice to Rahula about whatever we do, we need to reflect before the action and during the action and after the action to see whether that would bring happiness or not, is that a good action or not, and be aware of that. So being angry is probably not the good. I wouldn't advise one to be, because anger is an unwholesome mental quality. So being angry may be helpful in the action, but it's not wholesome. So I would probably reflect on it and be aware of anger is being experienced and try to be mindful of that and not expressing it out. But thank you for sharing your action.
Thanks, John. Oh. I think, Jesse, do you have an announcement? Okay. Well, thanks, Stephen.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Jesse, for holding it. Let's see what happens this week. We'll see what shape we're in next Sunday. Oh man, oh man. Woo-wee. I guess we could say it isn't boring. May we be happy and peaceful. Thanks, everybody. We got to stick together and sit together and practice together.